this morning. Welcome everyone and thank you for joining in. My name is Sofia Sotomayor and I recently onboarded, so this is actually my first tribal conference, and I'm currently training to be a PO in the tribal clean water section. Kate, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Kate Pinkerton. I'm a tribal clean water project officer in the water division at EPA Region 9, and I'm showing my video now, but I'm actually going to turn it off once we get started. In our test run, we were having a little bit of audio issues. So just saying hello, and then maybe I'll show myself again at the end.
Kate, that was a little choppy for me. Sophia, could you hear it very well?
Okay. So the funny thing is,
okay, it's working. It's working.
In the audio, in our test run, I decided to turn off my video really quick with my video on, but even that was bad. So I'm turning off my video and hopefully the audio is better now.
Okay, great. Sounds good so far.
Yeah, I will probably do the same just to make sure that you can hear us, but we wanted to put a face to the voice. And please, I think I see our people are already doing it, but please announce yourself in the chat box if you are here. Okay. So I'm going to turn off my video now just to improve the quality. Leisha, if you want to go to the next slide.
Okay.
So this is an overview of what we will cover today. We're going to walk through the Clean Water Act 106 program and all of the reporting requirements, as well as some tools developed to help you meet these requirements. So this is we're going to go over the sequence of a water quality program. This might look familiar if you have been to a 106 presentation before, but it's a really important one. And these steps are important to keep in mind as you work on your 106 program, whether you're just starting out or you have been working on a program for many years. So first, you're going to identify your goals and objectives for your water quality program. You might want to ask some questions like whether you want to monitor your surface water quality to make sure it's safe to fish, swim, and recreate, or if you're more concerned about a specific pollutant and want to track its impacts on your waters. So once you've identified your goals and objectives, Leisha, do you want to click you can develop a quality assurance project plan and monitoring strategy, which will outline what you plan to monitor, where, and how you plan to do it. So this will ensure that the samples you take and the data you collect are of good quality and can also be replicated by future staff. Then you'll collect water quality data. Do you want to click the next bubbles? You'll collect your water quality data and organize it. So for the 106 program, it must be submitted to your project officer in a WQX compatible format, which we will discuss in a few slides. Leisha, you can click all the little bubbles. You will also analyze results and identify any issues or concerns. So do you see any trends? Is there anything exceeding suggested or regulated limits? And finally, once you have developed a basic understanding of your surface water quality, you can then reevaluate to see if you have the same goals or if you have anything new to add or change, and the cycle will start all over again. So now we're going to take a closer look at the three main reporting requirements for 106 grant. The first is the Quality Assurance Project Plan, or QAP, and monitoring strategy. In Region 9, these are usually compiled in one document together, but in some regions, this may be seen in two separate documents. The second is data in a WQX compatible format, and the third is a water quality assessment report. There may be other deliverables that you turn in for your Clean Water Act 106 grant, depending on the work plan tasks that you propose. But these are the three main components that must be turned in for every grant. So taking a closer look at the QAP, which will include the monitoring strategy as well. This is required before any monitoring begins using 106 funds. So this is a very important document for guiding your field and lab procedures, ensuring the quality of the data that you produce, and sustaining your program by providing monitoring protocols for future staff members. These should be reviewed and updated at least every 5 years, but if you add new monitoring locations to your program or new water quality parameters, you should review and update your QAP. A QAP should contain your monitoring objectives, design, water quality indicators, quality assurance, data management, analysis and assessment, and procedures and protocol for reporting. So lots of things. This chart outlines the process for getting a new or revised QAP approval. So the tribe will receive assistance from the Quality Assurance Office in developing the QAP. After it is drafted and submitted to your PO, it will be sent back and forth with necessary comments and feedback from the PO and Quality Assurance Office, and edited until it is approved. And QAPs are reviewed, you can find links to the assistance on our Region 9 Tribal Water Grants website for QAP development. The second main reporting requirement is to submit your water quality monitoring data to your project officer in a STORA or WQX compatible format, and this will be an annual requirement. So the WQX is the database system that EPA uses to store water quality data. It really helps with sustainability of data and allows you to easily search and access data. The STORA warehouse was the former database for this, and it was decommissioned in June of 2018. But the process for data hasn't really changed for the tribes. EPA just stores and retrieves the data differently. So WQX is the mechanism for tribes to submit the water quality data to EPA, and then the water quality portal is the mechanism for anyone, including the public, to retrieve the water quality monitoring data. So they're two different systems. And there are three main categories of data that should be included when you submit water quality monitoring information. And that's shown on this slide. So one is the projects, which is why data were collected, a brief summary of monitoring plan. The second is the monitoring locations of where the data were collected. And the third is activities and results. So when, how, and what were collected, which measures what was monitored. So this shows some screenshots of the WQX template that's available online. Using this template is a really easy way to make sure that your data is compatible with reporting requirements. You have the option to use your own spreadsheets or database format if you choose, but there are certain required elements that need to be included in order to be WQX compatible. So these include, but are not limited to, project name, project identifier, monitoring location, latitude and longitude of that location, the GPS data collection method, county and state codes, activity types and start date, and monitoring characteristic name. So all of these that I just listed are starred on this slide in these various columns, so you can see what is needed. If you submit your data directly into WQX, that will complete this 106 reporting requirement. POs can find the data that you submitted through the water quality data portal, which I mentioned, or you may need to provide a copy of your data submission confirmation. It is not a requirement to submit data into WQX, but it is encouraged, and new tools will be developed, are being developed, that will help you analyze the data submitted to this portal. And we'll be going over some of those tools in this presentation. It can be helpful to talk to your lab about providing their results in an electronic format, such as Excel, not PDF. And this will make it easy for you to submit your data in a WQX compatible format. You can even provide the template shown here to your lab so they can see an example of what formatting you need, which just makes the process a bit easier. So if you need any help submitting WQX data, you can visit EPA's website, and you can find training videos that detail WQX rules, how to submit data, and tips. There's a video shown here. There's also guidance and contact information for our help desk. So if you have a basic question, you can chat with us at the WQX email help desk, which is wqx@epa.gov. You may request an appointment by emailing or calling the WQX help desk. And there's also a number. So if you submit an appointment request with the dates and times, you will receive a ticket number and meeting invitation as confirmation.
Okay, this is Kate again, so hopefully my audio is all right. Feel free to flag if it's not. So the third reporting requirement for the 106 program we're going to cover today is the Water Quality Assessment Report. Like submitting water quality data, this is an annual reporting requirement. The WQAR is a narrative and graphical account of water quality within tribal boundaries. It includes the types of water sampled, sampling procedures, and resulting data summaries. It also includes the program's interpretation of the data collected and the assessment methodology used. The WQAR helps EPA measure success towards improvement of water quality in tribal waters. On the next slide, I'm going to show you a template that we have that covers most of this information. However, if you choose not to use the template, make sure you address all of the points on the previous slide. There's more information on our website about WQARs as well. So on this screen is a screenshot of our WQAR template, and you can access this like many of the things that we've talked about today on our website, which I believe is at the bottom of the slide. Your taskbar might be covering it up a little bit, but I think the slides are available after this or now already if you want to look that up later. The template was developed a few years ago to help make this reporting requirement easier, but it isn't required to use. The template has had some changes over the years. For example, there's been some new parameter rows added, but it has not changed in the past few years. So if you use the template in the last year or two, you can just update that for your current reporting. If you have any suggestions for updates, feel free to let us know. So on the next slide is our screenshots from two other tabs in the template spreadsheet. One of them at the top is the Atlas of Tribal Waters. This shouldn't change too much year to year unless you've added land or waters into trust and expanded your TAS package. Below the Atlas is a screenshot of the Watershed Restoration tab, which is a place to describe what projects you have been implementing to address a water quality concern. These are often, but not always, 319 projects. So on the next slide, we're just going to briefly talk about the ATMIS pilot. For the past few years, 12 tribes from Region 5, 6, and 9 have participated in a tribal ATMIS pilot, which is a system states are required to use for reporting water quality assessments. So tribes in Region 6 were interested in looking into alternatives to the water quality assessment report and different ways of submitting that. And so this is another option tribes are exploring. And on the next slide is a timeline of the ATMIS pilot and where we are now, which I think if you click the button, the arrow will show where we are now. There we go. And most participating tribes have now submitted 3 years worth of assessments and ATMIS and have reflected on the benefits and challenges of using this to report water quality assessment information. Based on that feedback, mostly positive, the pilot has been expanded earlier this year, a memo was shared nationwide requesting nominations for new participants. 17 new participants from regions 1, 2, 5, 6, and 8 have been identified and are being paired with existing tribal pilot participants as mentors. No additional tribes in Region 9 expressed interest as far as I know, so we still only have one participant in Region 9. And assessment training modules and parameter fact sheets are also being developed to assist tribes with water quality assessment who are participating in this pilot, but we'll discuss those a little bit more later because they could also be just generally helpful to any tribal water program. Yeah, on that slide. So you also may have heard that the 106 guidance is being updated, which includes information about reporting requirements that we've described in this presentation. While we don't anticipate, drastic changes to these requirements, we are beginning to work on updating our guidance to make it more relevant. For example, as Sophia mentioned, STORET no longer exists, and there's references in the guidance to STORET, and that's been replaced by WQX and the Water Quality Data Portal. We also may consider what parts of it are most useful and places where more or less information might be needed on a topic, or the potential to mention new initiatives such as ATMIS. So this is, again, really early in the process, and for those of you who attended the Water Division Director session, you heard there, I noticed there was like a lot of interest there in this topic. Again, this is very early. Feel free to provide any feedback about the guidance to your project officer, or the lead for our region is Danielle Angelis. So feel free to reach out to her as well, or myself. All right, so I think on the next slide we have a little quiz. So I think you might need to click to show what the quiz is. Cool. So what are the 3 106 reporting requirements? If you want to participate in our quiz, you can type your responses in the chat box. We'll try to keep things a little bit, we probably won't turn off audio for that, but also we thought this could be a good time to pause for any questions. So feel free to type any questions you might have in the chat box as well before we move on to talking about a couple different tools we have.
I haven't seen any questions in the chat so far, so.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I don't see any questions, but I do see one response so far to the quiz.
So, Brianna is our first participant.
One more, Brianna. Oh, you got it, Samuel.
Here we go.
Way to go. Good job. I don't have any prizes to give you. And I think our 106 guidance says we can give more money for getting a quiz question right, so I can't do that either, but thank you for participating in the quiz. Good job, everyone. So yeah, like Brianna and Samuel and a few others mentioned, it's the QAP and the monitoring strategy, the data and WQX, and the WQAR. Okay, so still no questions it looks like, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide, which you have. Cool.
Yeah, and if there's any questions, we'll also get to them again at the end, so you can just type them in the chat. So this is the first we're going to introduce. It's the Tribal Roadmap, and it can help you get started with reporting data in a WQX compatible format. So this is an Excel-based tool, and it's a series of 6 questions that are aimed at determining where you are in collecting, managing, and submitting your water quality data. So this slide shows some example questions that you might be asked, like do you have your org ID and user ID for WQX? How do you record your water quality monitoring field data? And do you have important configurations for submitting your data? Sometimes a response option is simply, I don't know, and that's totally okay. Next slide. So after you answer those 6 questions, you will receive a customized document based on your responses that will guide you through the WQX data submission process. So this little screenshot here, if you can read it, shows 2 examples. If you answered that you didn't have an org ID for WQX or don't know what it is, the guide will tell you who to contact. And if you answer that your data is not in WQX compatible format or don't know what that is, the guide will provide directions for where to find tutorials and resources about how to do that. So this guide is really useful for maintaining program information or retrieving it during periods of staff turnover or advancing your program to another level. And then the second part of this tool, so before you use the second part of this tool, you must have submitted data into WQX prior to using it. But this will allow you to retrieve information that already exists in WQX, so new users can get an idea of what already exists there before taking next steps. There's also interesting summary information that you can kind of see in this chart, which shows like the minimum, maximum, average, and number of stations by water body type. So hint, this could be useful for helping complete your ATLAS in your water quality assessment report. The third requirement. So you can also map monitoring stations using an external mapping application, such as Google Earth or ArcGIS Explorer. And there are some basic graphing capabilities in this tool as well. So some of these features are similar to the data discovery tool, which we will also cover later in this presentation.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the SP14B tool. Again, this can be found on our Region 9 Clean Water Act 106 reporting requirements website. This tool is designed to allow for the simple discovery of water quality monitoring data and comparison of that data against basic numeric criteria. It was developed in part to evaluate the former SP14B measure that no longer exists to demonstrate that a monitoring station is maintaining water quality. Even though it was for that measure, this tool is generally helpful for water quality data assessment, especially against criteria if you have water quality standards or intend to participate in the ATMIS pilot. This tool uses web services that are available at the Water Quality Data portal. For data to be available in the tool, it must be submitted. You must first submit data into EPA via the Water Quality Exchange, or WQX. Again, a perk of using or submitting data into WQX is that some of these tools are available for you to use to analyze it. On the next slide, you'll see what the tool looks like a little bit. After you download the Excel-based tool from our website, you must first retrieve a list of the water quality monitoring stations to evaluate against. This is done by using the Stations tab and using the search form. You can search by organization or HUC, hydrologic unit code, or lat-long coordinates. The most common approach would be to search by org ID. This is the ID that you are given to upload all your data to WQX. So for example, I don't know if it's listed here, but that, for example, Cherokee WQX is an example of an org ID. If you have many stations, you may want to limit your search by a specific geography, like 8-digit HUC, or within a distance of a lat-long coordinate. You must enter at least one of the criteria to conduct a search. And once you've entered the criteria, click search, and station information will appear on the Stations tab. So the search form I mentioned is in the foreground, and the background is an Excel sheet, and you can see all the stations listed in column C for this example. On this slide, once you select the organization or location, you have an option to map all of those stations. It helps to already have a mapping application such as Google Earth or ArcGIS open before you choose the option to click Map All Stations, and this can help you identify which station you're interested in evaluating further. And again, you want to use the search box to, select the station to retrieve data from under the Step 2 tab, which is shown here on this slide. You would select a station you're interested in evaluating, and then you can enter additional information such as the date sampled. And you'll also need to enter the parameter you would like to analyze, such as ammonia or DO, and then you would enter upper and lower limits to determine whether your results are within ideal boundaries. These limits could be limits that your tribe has set, or these could be EPA limits, or if you're familiar with the nearby state limits, you could enter that as well. So on the next, after you click the Analyze tab, the tool will take you to the Analysis tab, and here's where you can find the data for your site that you selected over the date range you indicated. So an example of a date range that you could indicate is your project period for your grant, which for most people is October to September. So there will be values in blue, but also a trend line in purple, and the line for the limit you set in green and or red. You can also find some summary statistics such as mean, max, etc., and the number of times the value exceeded the limits you set. And so on this slide, you can see what the Analysis tab looks like without that search box. As you can see in this example, the DO values are in blue, so the line that's fluctuating a little bit. It never exceeded, though, the lower limit given of 5 milligrams per liter. And on this slide, here's an example of pH. And if you've done an analysis you would like to keep, you can always click the Save button, which is circled on the lower-ish left hand of the slide. And this will save all of the analysis that you did while having this document open to the Saved Analysis tab. So you can always go back to return to that information. It doesn't have to be a one-time analysis. So on this slide, if you save multiple analysis, you can also, again, use the mapping capabilities to see which sites are within the limits and which are not by going to that Saved Analysis tab and clicking Map All Saves or Map Selected. Sites in green are within the limits you set. So in this case, most of the sites were good, but it looks like one site outside of was outside of one of the limits that you set. Okay. And then the last tool that we're going to go over is the data discovery tool. Sophia mentioned this earlier. This tool uses our software and your internet browser to view, QC, and summarize data. Ooh, I need a drink of water. Hold on. Okay. Summarize data that exists in WQX. For anyone who is unfamiliar, our software is a free open source program that typically uses coding for analysis, but coding experience is not needed to run this particular tool because the majority of the user interface takes place in your internet browser. It was developed by EPA headquarters and was released a few years ago, but they've been doing regular updates to add new features. One feature shown here is that you can view and filter non-detects or duplicates in your data. So that's one way to QC information that you've submitted to WQX. It also gives you some basic summary statistics such as min, max, average, and count by station, monitoring station. And on this slide demonstrates some of the mapping and graphing features of this tool. On the left, the size of the bubble indicates a larger number of samples and results at that monitoring station. There's also a pop-up that can say the lat long and ID name. You can filter these stations on the left by parameter, samples, units, methods, value range, and more. And once you select a station, you can also graph trend information for up to 3 parameters measured at that station. So that's what's on the right screenshot. Some of that data is a little funky, but If you have a lot of data in there, it can be helpful to see that summary over time. And this fun picture, you can also see a pie chart that breaks down all the parameters that you're sampling for. In this case, at this location, there's a lot of parameters being measured. And another feature of the tool is graphing the frequency of the parameters you monitor. So here you can see, you know, how frequently they've been monitoring fecal coliform, phosphorus, nitrogen, etc., different time and what times of year. And that is that for the tools. So on our next slide, this is just a quick summary. Again, there are 3 106 reporting requirements. And like Sophia mentioned, you know, you may have other deliverables that you submit for your 106 program. These are just the 3 core ones: the QAP, the data in a STORET or WQX compatible format, and the water quality assessment report. And then EPA has some tools that we can offer to help you out with these reporting requirements. So the tribal roadmap that Sophia covered can help with your QAP development and getting your data in a compatible format. And then the SP14B tool and the data discovery tool can help with your water quality assessment report. On this slide, just wanted to give a heads up about a few things in the works. Again, at headquarters, the first one is parameter fact sheets. Headquarters with regional input has been working on projects like this to help you assess your water quality data, and this includes these detailed fact sheets on parameters like DO, the basic parameters like DO, E. coli, macroinvertebrates, nutrients, pH, temperature, and turbidity, to help you understand more about the parameter, like why it's important to monitor, how to monitor for that parameter, and what typical measurements are, impacts of impaired levels, and other factors to consider with monitoring when you're monitoring. This might sound familiar. We do actually have some Region 9 fact sheets along the same topic on our website right now, but these will include a lot more information, some more technical information to consider when monitoring. The drafts that I've seen, you know, are a couple pages long, so you can just expect to get more out of them. And they're still under development, and they're expected to be available early next year. And then the second project that headquarters has been working on are assessment modules that could be used for regional trainings on water quality standards, general considerations on assessing water quality data, and specific water quality parameter assessments. They include, you know, presentations with notes and exercises, and these were piloted in a session at the 2019 Tribal Land and Environment Forum. And while PDFs of those presentations are available on the 2019 TLEF website, if you're interested to learn more about those assessment modules aren't technically final and may still be revised until they're readily available for use, but just wanted to keep you updated with you know, what's been going on with those, and you know, if there's any new information about the modules or the fact sheets, we'll be sure to share that. And on this slide, so we just covered a few of EPA's tools. Most of them had been, you know, developed with tribal work in mind. There's also other water quality tools available at epa.gov/waterdata. You know, they may not be applicable to all the work you do, but if you're interested in learning more about what's available, you can check this out. For example, the NPDAT tool uses a variety of data sources like WQX and USGS sparrow modeling to provide new information on nitrogen and phosphorus loading amounts, impairments, and TMDLs. The stormwater calculator accesses several national databases that provide soil, topography, rainfall, and evaporation information for the chosen site. And the user supplies information about the site's land cover and selects the types of low impact development controls they would like to use. There's also been a few webinars lately about How's My Waterway, which is an app you can use to check out, water in your wherever you are. Sorry, coughed. Sophia, do you want to read this slide?
Yeah, so this is our contact information. So you can contact a Clean Water Act project officer to kind of start up your program, or if you have any questions, and then Kate and I are both available as well. And other than that, if anybody wants to type any questions, I've been monitoring the chat box and I don't see any questions so far. Ian Bell just asked, can you cover WQX required parameters?
So that's an interesting question, Ian. It sounds like you're asking if there's any parameters that you definitely have to submit. I would refer you to our 106 guidance for that. There's a couple of core parameters that we recommend you, if you're starting a program, that you start monitoring. So those include dissolved oxygen, pH, water temperature, and turbidity. And then as you build your program, you may want to include phosphorus, things like phosphorus or nitrogen. And then, as you continue building, maybe macroinvertebrates, E. coli, some other general information. So we don't, these are the recommended core parameters, but you also need to take into account, what's important to, your tribal water quality program. What concerns do you have about, various pollution sources? So yeah, I would, if that's what you're asking, we have some like core recommended parameters, but we don't necessarily, some tribes like to keep water data internal and not release all results to the public. Oh, okay, yeah. So you don't have to submit your data into WQX. That's actually not a requirement right now, at least. And so if you don't want your data to be publicly available, there's a couple options. You can just submit your data in a WQX compatible format. So still taking into account all those categories of information, metadata that Sophia covered, and just submit it to your project officer for your 106 grant. The other option, and I haven't done this myself, but I believe there's an option to submit data into WQX and mark it as something like not final, and then it won't show up in our search in the water quality data portal. So again, if that's a concern of yours, you can talk to your project officer, but and if there's anyone else from our program that wants to weigh in on that, feel free to. Okay. Okay, so this Zoom recording going to be available? We didn't, oh, okay. I believe so.
It's recorded.
Is
So
Melissa?
the recording. Melissa,
Yeah.
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 And Melissa, do you know where people can access the recordings from?
The recording will be uploaded to the website, so they'll be able to find it on the session page.
Okay. I think someone also asked about the slides. I think they'll be available in the same place, right?
Yes, they are actually already available. If you turn those into Vanessa, they'll be on the session page under the media tab.
Okay, great. Okay, so I see a new question, but back up here, there was, does the recommended software help with analysis of data for longer time durations of data, say like 5 to 10, for example, looking at trends for E. coli? So if you're asking about if the tools that we went over today can go over larger years of data, I believe so. I'd have to test that out, and I'm happy to help with that if you have any questions about how to use the tools. Okay, so hopefully that answered that. There was another question, can WQX make or assist with future projections, or is it explicitly for data storage and sharing? Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't think it does future projections, but you can always email wqx@epa.gov to ask, but I don't think it does. If we are wanting to add an additional core parameters such as nitrogen and phosphorus, how would we go about the process of adding it to WQX? So this may not be what you're asking, but the first thing you would definitely want to do is make sure that's in your QAP, your Quality Assurance Project Plans. You may need to do a QAP update, Clayton. For adding it to WQX, it would just be, another entry in your existing Excel sheet, or it depends on how you upload it. There's a couple different ways. But there's you don't need to, register any parameters. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking. And again, if we know some of the basics of WQX, but if you have any really technical questions, I recommend contacting the help desk, wqx@epa.gov.
I can put the help desk info in the chat too.
Oh, perfect. Any other questions? We can wait another minute or so, but as always, you can always email your project officer about any of the questions you might have about your 106 reporting requirements, or at the end of our presentation. Sophia and our email are listed on that slide, so you can contact us about any of the tools we went over. As I mentioned before, if you have questions about the 106 guidance update or have any feedback to share about what you might want to see that's different, feel free to let your project officer know or ask me or Danielle Angelis. Okay. That seems it for the questions. Melissa, do we end early if there's no questions, or do we just stay on?
If you guys like to and there's no questions, you are free to.
It looks like we did just get one more. Is there a strategy for reviewing data and identifying the need for pollution remediation relating to the watershed management plan? Oh, I will answer your question, Ryan, but I appreciate John's message. Very enthusiastic message. You're welcome. Okay, so is there a strategy for reviewing data and identifying the need for pollution remediation? So this, I can touch on this a little bit, but this might be a question you'll want to have more in depth with your project officer. But, a few things you may want to consider are, if you don't have criteria set for your tribe and you're doing water quality monitoring, you may want to look at what nearby state criteria is for various parameters, or what the EPA recommended criteria is. And if you're seeing, exceedances of some of the limits that are recommended by or set by the state or recommended by EPA, then that might be a flag for an area of focus. The fact sheets that I mentioned earlier might be really helpful. Oh, you have water quality goals based on EPA recreational standards. Yeah, so if you're doing monitoring and you're seeing results exceed those water quality goals based on the EPA's recreational standards, then that might be an area of focus for you. And that could, I'd recommend that's where you would start. For the watershed management plan, that's getting into a little bit more of the 319 arena. So you may want to talk with our lead for that in the region, Howard Kahn. But again, this might be a more detailed conversation with your PO who's more familiar with your program. Anyone else on the team want to weigh in on that? I don't know if we can unmute people.
Yes,
okay,
they can request to be unmuted, or you can ask them to unmute themselves. Just go by their name.
Okay. Okay. Team, feel free to message if you want to weigh in on any of these questions. Oh, okay. Ryan, we'll maybe come back to your question. Let's see. Jefferson, for adding a monitoring parameter to the QAP, do we just need to include a new section to justify projects monitoring and results description? Yeah, so for adding a new parameter to your QAP, you'll want to, again, talk to your project officer about that. It can be pretty straightforward. You know, a lot of people list the parameters that they're monitoring in a table, and you can just add, you know, that to that table, and then, yeah, a section discussing why you want to conduct monitoring for that parameter. And again, I would recommend having conversations with folks in our QA office, and they'll be able to give you a lot more guidance on how to actually go about that. Oh, Howard is your PO. Cool. Well, that's convenient. He should be able to help you with your watershed management plan. Do you want to be unmuted, Ryan, to talk about this? Okay. Let's see.
Can you hear me?
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I just I guess it's good to bring up a real life example. It's funny that you guys brought up the software, because that's kind of the point I'm at right now, and that we have like 10 years worth of data, and Excel is having a heart attack. So you know, I'm trying to figure out how to approach that and how to make sense of it, because when I look at the long-term trends, I mean, if you look at like the maxes and mins on the graph, and some of the spikes, I can't tell if the E. coli data is valid, so that there's a spike of say 1800, and it's like, well, if you're dealing with a spike of 1800, I mean, that's a tad bit above EPA standard. So if to compare it to a random point like that, it throws off the whole graph. And so I'm trying to narrow down the data to think realistically and kind of decide on what is necessary. Is more data required? Is the data valid? And kind of looking at the trends and seeing what, like, I guess whoever said about looking at future trends, kind of expecting what could be coming based on different seasons and seasonal data, and looking at like weather trends, because if cattle are grazing and then all of a sudden you have a rainstorm, well, you're probably going to have a pretty good spike in E. coli. So I'm just trying, of all this data, it was a big, and it takes a lot of time, big investment. And so I want to see it, make sense of it. That's, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious. I'm gonna check with our folks at headquarters. It'd be cool. I was looking at the data discovery tool to see, because it does have a way to, QC the data, take out like non-detects and any duplicates. But I couldn't remember if it took out, like, if there was a way to take out outliers, which it sounds like you might be experiencing. Are those high levels, are you seeing them happen multiple times, or are they true outliers? You just see it once and then
there's a few of them.
Okay.
Yeah, just a few. But that's the thing. Based on how many different project managers water quality coordinators have been in this position, it's hard to verify the practices and verify that everybody was following the same standards. So I think the data is pretty valid, but an outlier can. What I'm seeing is trends based on seasons, and what I'm getting down to is, what's the point of the data? What can we use the data for? Why was all this investment made in this data? And based on that, what do with it? What can we make happen? And what projects can be made possible? Because anytime I'm looking at grant funding or funding a project, how can I use the data to prove that point and secure funding to make the project happen and clean it up, so that basically to clean up that data so it looks a lot better.
Yeah, and I think it's great that you have so much data, and if you're applying for grants, it sounds like you have a great way to justify, like, we've seen over the 10 years that we've been collecting this information, we've seen these spikes in either E. coli, etc., and we want to address it through these various projects. I think it's great that you have so much information to be able to justify that. One thing though, if you're seeing, it sounds like you are experiencing some spikes. If you're seeing information, and it's the same levels all the time, you don't in some cases, if you're monitoring for really expensive parameters and you're not seeing much change and it's not that informative, feel free to talk to your PO or like the QA office about maybe monitoring that parameter less frequently, or tailor your program to what your needs are. So
I already did. Actually, that was one of the. I've been in the process of rewriting the QA and changing the sampling plan so that we're not wasting funding, because it is indeed very expensive. It's one of the most expensive pieces to continuous pieces to the project, and if it's not producing any new results, I mean, ambient water quality is a little different than sampling for E. coli. And I was looking at expanding, like other people were commenting about, looking into more total nitrogen and total phosphorus, and expanding that to look for like septic tank pollution. But same thing, the costs add up really quick. And that was one of the other questions I was going to bring up was, how do we know we're making the right decision on the frequency of sampling in relation to our sources, if there's guidance on that?
Yeah, we are nearing the end of our session, so we may need to end this conversation. Again, I would always suggest talk to your PO about any changes you want to take to your monitoring system. Our QA office can be really helpful making those kind of decisions with you or help giving you guidance. Yeah, so again, the 106, the monitoring of the 106 program is a key component of the 106 program. So I hope I wasn't like stop monitoring everything. That's not what I was trying to say, but
No,
monitoring
not
is
at
still
all.
very important. But yeah,
Thank you for your
I would
time,
just,
though.
if
I
you're
really
talking about
appreciate it.
doing,
Yeah.
yeah, and if you're talking about doing any changes, again, talk to your PO and our QA office. Yeah, and thanks for sharing your example. Looks like Theodore in the chat found it very helpful.
You're welcome. I think a real world example always brings things, brings a little more foundation. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Well, thank you everyone. Thanks for your engagement on the quiz and Ryan, your example. And stay tuned. We have, if you want more Clean Water Act information, we have a presentation at 11, I believe. So join that one as well. All right, everyone, have a good day.
Thank you everyone for joining in.
Okay.